When a billionaire CEO finds a grease-stained mechanic standing in her doorway during the worst blizzard Chicago has seen in decades, she has no idea that returning her lost purse will cost him everything: his pride, his peace, and nearly his daughter. But what she's about to discover is that some prices are worth paying and some connections are worth destroying empires for. Welcome to a story about two people who had every reason to stay strangers, but one snowstorm that made staying apart impossible. If this story reaches your city, drop a comment below and hit that like button. I want to see how far this journey travels. The wrench slipped. Mason Reed cursed under his breath as his knuckles scraped against the undercarriage of the Chevy Tahoe suspended above him. Blood welled up across his fingers, mixing with the engine grease already coating his hands. He didn't bother wiping it away. At this point, what was a little more blood? "Mason, you still under there?" The voice belonged to Tommy Chen, his only full-time employee at Reed Auto Repair. The kid was 23, eager, and about as useful with a timing belt as a golden retriever with a Rubik's Cube. "Where else would I be, Tommy?" Mason called back, his voice echoing in the cramped space beneath the vehicle. "Cabo. Just checking. It's almost midnight, man. You've been at this for 16 hours. "Yeah, well, Mrs. Patterson needs her car by tomorrow morning, and she's already given me 3 extensions. Mason tightened the last bolt with more force than necessary. "She's a 70-year-old widow on a fixed income. I'm not charging her storage fees." Tommy appeared at the edge of the hydraulic lift, his face upside down from Mason's perspective. "You know that's why we're broke, right? Because you're too nice? We're not broke. We're cash flow challenged." "That's just broke with extra words." Mason couldn't argue. The garage had been hemorrhaging money for the past 8 months. Not because of lack of skill. Mason could rebuild a transmission blindfolded, but because he couldn't bring himself to turn away people who needed help but couldn't afford his competitors' rates. People like Mrs. Patterson. People like he'd been 3 years ago when his wife Emma died and left him with a mortgage, a 4-year-old daughter, and medical bills that still kept him awake at night. "Hand me the oil pan," Mason said. Tommy passed it down. "Weather guy says we're getting hammered tonight, like apocalypse-level snow." "Chicago in January, what else is new?" "No, man, I'm serious. They're saying 2 feet, maybe more. Wind chills below 0. They want everyone off the roads by 1 a.m. Mason glanced at his watch. 11:47 p.m. He'd need at least another 20 minutes to finish the oil change and button everything up. Then 15 minutes to clean up, lock up, and get to his car. He'd be cutting it close, but he'd driven through worse. "I'll be fine," he said. What he didn't say was that he had to be fine, because his daughter Lily was sleeping at his mother's house across town, and he'd promised to pick her up first thing in the morning. Lily was 7 now, with Emma's dark curls and his stubborn chin, and she was the only reason Mason dragged himself out of bed every morning to face another day of unpaid invoices and impossible choices. 30 minutes later, Mason locked the garage's roll-up door and trudged across the snow-dusted parking lot to his 2008 Ford Explorer. The SUV was black, or had been, before Chicago winters had faded it to a mottled charcoal gray. The driver's side door squeaked when he opened it, a sound he'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. "Tomorrow," he muttered to himself, the same lie he'd been telling since summer. The engine turned over on the second try, coughing blue smoke before settling into an uneven idle. Mason let it warm up while he scraped ice off the windshield with a credit card. His ice scraper had broken in November, and he hadn't gotten around to buying a new one. By the time he pulled onto Western Avenue, the snow had begun in earnest. Not the gentle, picturesque flakes from holiday movies, but aggressive, wind-driven pellets that machine-gunned his windshield and reduced visibility to maybe 30 feet. The roads were empty except for a few snowplows and one maniac in a Honda Civic who blew past him doing at least 50. Mason kept it at 25, both hands on the wheel, leaning forward to peer through the inadequate arc his wipers were clearing. The radio crackled with emergency alerts and warnings to stay off the roads. He turned it off. The silence was better than the reminder that he was doing exactly what the authorities were telling him not to do. His neighborhood was on the north side, in a part of Lincoln Park that real estate agents called transitional, which meant it was nice enough to be expensive, but not nice enough to keep out people like Mason who'd bought before the latest development boom. His house was a small 2-bedroom bungalow that needed a new roof and knew everything else. But it was his, and it was Lily's, and that made it perfect despite the peeling paint and the crack in the foundation. He turned onto his street at 12:43 a.m. The snow was already 6 inches deep and showed no signs of stopping. His headlights swept across the familiar row of houses, most of them dark except for the occasional porch light or upstairs window. And that's when he saw it. A purse. Not just any purse. Even from 20 feet away, Mason could tell it was expensive. It sat half buried in the snow on the sidewalk outside the house next to his. The modern 3-story monstrosity that some developer had shoehorned onto a double lot 2 years ago. The house had sold for $3.2 million. Mason knew because the whole neighborhood had gossiped about it for weeks. But it had sat empty until a few months ago when someone finally moved in. Mason had never met his new neighbor. He'd seen lights on at odd hours and occasionally a black town car in the driveway. But whoever lived there kept to themselves. Fine by him. He had enough complications without adding nosy neighbors to the list. He should have kept driving. That would have been the smart thing to do. Park in his own driveway, trudge through the snow to his own front door, pour himself 2 fingers of the cheap bourbon he kept above the fridge, and collapse into bed for 4 hours before he had to get up and do it all again. But the purse nagged at him. Someone had lost it. Someone who probably didn't realize it was missing yet, buried under 6 inches of snow and counting. By morning, it would be under 2 feet, frozen solid, possibly ruined. And even though Mason's checking account had $237 in it and his credit cards were maxed out, he knew what that purse probably cost. Knew that to some people, losing something like that would be catastrophic. Emma used to tease him about this, about his compulsive need to fix things, to help people, even when it cost him. "You'd give away your last dollar to a stranger," she'd said once, "and then walk home in the rain because you couldn't afford cab fare." She'd been right. Mason parked in front of his house, killed the engine, and climbed out into the storm. The wind hit him like a fist, stealing his breath and driving snow into his eyes. He'd left his coat at the garage. Brilliant. So he was wearing just his work shirt and jeans, both of which were already soaked through by the time he reached the purse. He picked it up, brushing off the snow. It was some designer brand he didn't recognize, made of leather that felt like butter despite being half frozen. Heavy, too. He unzipped it, shielding the contents from the wind. Wallet, phone, keys, lipstick, a small leather notebook. Everything someone would need to get through their day, now sitting in the snow because of a moment of carelessness. Mason looked up at the house. It was massive and modern, all glass and steel and sharp angles that looked like they'd been designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Warm light glowed behind floor-to-ceiling windows on the ground floor, and he thought he saw movement inside. He could leave the purse on the doorstep, ring the bell, and walk away before anyone answered. That would be the efficient thing to do. Instead, he found himself walking up the driveway. The front door was one of those heavy modern things made of some dark wood with a horizontal steel handle. There was no doorbell that he could see, just a small camera mounted above the frame. Mason knocked, then waited, shivering as the wind tried to strip the skin from his face. Nothing. He knocked again, harder. The door opened. The woman standing there was not what Mason expected. He'd built up an image in his head during the 30-second walk from the street. Someone older, maybe, dripping with jewelry and attitude, the kind of person who bought $3.2 million houses in Lincoln Park as investment properties. Instead, she looked about 30, maybe a year or two younger than Mason himself. She was tall, maybe 5'8" or 5'9", with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and no makeup that he could see. She wore gray sweatpants and an oversized Northwestern hoodie that looked like it had seen better days. Her feet were bare. What struck him most were her eyes. They were green, almost startlingly so. And they held an expression he recognized because he saw it in his own mirror every morning. Exhaustion mixed with a kind of wary guardedness, like she was waiting for the next bad thing to happen. "Can I help you?" Her voice was soft, but not warm. "Careful." Mason held up the purse. "Found this outside, figured it was yours." She stared at the purse, then at him, then back at the purse. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. "Where did you find it?" "On the sidewalk, half buried in the snow." Mason felt suddenly self-conscious about his appearance. His grease-stained clothes, his bleeding knuckles, the fact that he probably smelled like motor oil and old coffee. "I live next door. Saw it when I was pulling in." She took the purse, her fingers brushing his for a fraction of a second. Even through the cold, he felt how warm her hands were. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't even realize I'd lost it." "Must have dropped it when you came in, or maybe when you were getting mail or something." Mason shrugged. "Anyway, stay warm." He turned to leave. "Wait." He stopped, looked back. She was studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Not in a threatening way, but like she was trying to solve a puzzle and he was the missing piece. "You're bleeding," she said, nodding at his hands. "Yeah, well, hazard of the job." He shoved his hands in his pockets. "It's fine." "You're also soaked through and probably hypothermic." She stepped back from the door. "Come inside for a minute, warm up." "That's not necessary." "I know it's not necessary. I'm offering anyway." Her tone left no room for argument. "You returned my purse in a blizzard. The least I can do is make sure you don't freeze to death on my doorstep. Bad for property values." There was the faintest hint of humor in that last part, and despite himself, Mason smiled. "Just for a minute," he said. He followed her inside, and the warmth hit him like a wall. The house was even more impressive from the inside. Soaring ceilings, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than his car, art on the walls that he didn't understand but assumed was expensive because it looked vaguely uncomfortable to look at. But what struck him most was how empty it felt. Not physically empty, there was plenty of furniture and decoration, but emotionally empty. Like a hotel lobby or a museum, a space designed to be looked at rather than lived in. "I'm Scarlett," the woman said, leading him through a hallway into what appeared to be a kitchen roughly the size of his entire first floor. Scarlett Whitmore. The name tickled something in Mason's memory, but he couldn't place it. Someone famous, maybe? An actress? He didn't follow that stuff. "Mason Reed." "Mason." She said his name like she was testing it out. "You said you lived next door?" "Yeah, the small place, with the sagging porch and the yard that needs work." "I like your house. It looks lived in." She gestured to a stool at the kitchen island. "Sit. I'll get you something to clean up those hands." Mason sat, feeling absurdly out of place. The kitchen was all white marble and stainless steel, with appliances that looked like they belonged in a spaceship. Through the windows, he could see the snow still coming down, even heavier now. Scarlett returned with a first aid kit and a dish towel. She handed him the towel first. "Dry off." He did as instructed, wiping the snow and moisture from his face and hair. When he looked up, she was running warm water in the sink. "Put your hands in," she said. "You don't have to." "I know. But I'm going to anyway, because those cuts need to be cleaned, and I'm guessing you were planning to just ignore them until they got infected." She wasn't wrong. Mason moved to the sink and she guided his hands under the warm water. The sting made him wince, but the warmth felt incredible after the bitter cold outside. "What do you do?" she asked, focused on cleaning the grease and blood from his knuckles. "For work, I mean. I own an auto repair shop." "Well, own is a generous word. The bank owns it. I just work there." "Hence the grease and cuts. Occupational hazard, you?" There was a pause, brief but noticeable. "I work in tech," she said finally. "Software." "Ah." Mason had no idea what that meant, but he nodded anyway. "That explains the nice house." "Does it?" Her tone was unreadable. She dried his hands with a clean towel, then applied antibiotic ointment to the cuts with a gentleness that surprised him. Her movements were efficient but not clinical, like she'd done this before. "You're good at this," he said. "I had a lot of practice." Another pause. "My father was a mechanic, actually. Not airplanes, but same principle. He was always coming home with cuts and bruises." "Was?" "He died when I was 16. Heart attack." She said it matter-of-factly, but Mason heard the grief underneath, the kind that never really goes away, just gets more familiar. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." She finished wrapping a bandage around his worst cut. "There. Try not to get it too dirty." "I'll do my best, but I'm pretty much guaranteed to have my hands in an engine block by 8 a.m. tomorrow." Scarlett smiled. It was small and quickly hidden, but it transformed her face for a moment, making her look younger and less guarded. "Coffee?" she asked. Mason knew he should leave, should thank her, head next door, and get what little sleep he could before dawn. but something in her expression made him hesitate. She looked lonely. The same kind of lonely he felt every night when he came home to an empty house and the ghost of a life that used to be. "Sure," he said. "Coffee sounds good." She moved to an espresso machine that looked like it required an engineering degree to operate. Mason watched as she worked, noticing small things. The way she moved through the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who spent a lot of time alone. The fact that despite the size and expense of the space, there were no personal touches anywhere. No photos, no magnets on the fridge, no clutter. "Do you take milk?" she asked. "Sugar?" "Black is fine." She handed him a cup, actual porcelain, not a mug, and poured one for herself. Instead of sitting at the island, she led him to a living room that featured a fireplace currently putting out enough heat to warm a small country. They sat on opposite ends of a couch that probably cost more than Mason made in 6 months. The snow hammered against floor-to-ceiling windows, creating a sound like static. "Hell of a storm," Mason said, immediately regretting the cliché. But Scarlett just nodded. "I was watching it from up here. It's beautiful in a terrifying way." "That's one word for it. I was going for inconvenient." "You had to drive through it to get home?" "Yeah, I was working late. Had a customer who needed her car by morning." "Must be a good customer." She's 70, living on Social Security, and her car is the only way she can get to her daughter's house to watch her grandkids so her daughter can work. Mason shrugged. "So yeah, good customer." Scarlett studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. "You don't charge her your normal rate, do you?" "How do you—" "Because you're here at almost 1 in the morning, bleeding and half frozen, returning a stranger's purse in a blizzard instead of going straight home." She tilted her head. "You're not very good at looking out for yourself, are you?" Mason laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "My employees keep telling me that." "How many employees?" "One, Tommy. He's a good kid, but he's still learning." "Family?" "I have a daughter, Lily. She's 7. Something shifted in Scarlett's expression. "Where is she tonight?" "At my mother's. I'm picking her up in the morning." Mason paused, then added, "Her mother, my wife, died 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry." And she sounded like she meant it, not just saying the words because they were expected. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the snow. Mason should have felt awkward. He was sitting in a mansion with a woman he'd met 15 minutes ago, discussing his dead wife. But somehow it felt natural, like they were both operating under rules that didn't quite apply to the outside world. "Can I ask you something?" Scarlett said finally. "Sure." "Why did you stop?" "To pick up the purse, I mean. Most people would have just driven past." Mason considered the question. "My wife used to say I had a compulsion to fix things. Not just cars. Everything. People's problems, broken situations, stray cats." He smiled at the memory. "She was right. I can't see something wrong and not try to make it better, even when it costs me." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." "But you do it anyway." "Yeah." Scarlett nodded slowly, like he'd confirmed something she'd been wondering about. "I used to be like that. When I was younger. Always trying to help, to fix things for people." "What changed?" Her smile was sad and distant. "I learned that most people don't want help. They want something from you. And once you figure that out, it gets easier to just stop trying." There was a story there, Mason could tell. Something that had hurt her badly enough to build these walls, to buy this massive house in a neighborhood where she didn't know anyone, to spend her nights alone watching snowstorms through floor-to-ceiling windows. "That sounds lonely," he said. "It is." She met his eyes. "But it's safer." The wind rattled the windows and the lights flickered for a moment before steadying. Scarlett glanced at the ceiling. "We might lose power," she said. "Happens sometimes in storms like this." "You have a generator?" "Somewhere. I've never actually used it." "Want me to check it out? Make sure it'll kick on if you need it?" She laughed. "You just can't help yourself, can you?" "Told you, compulsion. It's fine. If the power goes out, it goes out." She drained her coffee. "But you should probably get home before the roads get completely impassable." Mason checked his watch. 1:17 a.m. "Yeah, you're right." They stood, and Scarlett walked him back to the front door. Mason noticed her hesitate before opening it, like she was reluctant to let the outside world back in. "Thank you," she said, "for the purse and for the conversation. Thank you for the coffee and the first aid." Mason pulled up his collar, preparing to face the storm again. "Stay warm." He made it 3 steps before she called after him. "Mason?" He turned. Scarlett stood in his doorway, backlit by the warm interior lights, and for a moment she looked smaller than she had before, vulnerable. "The roads are getting really bad," she said, "and your house is dark. Did you lose power already?" Mason looked at his bungalow. She was right. No lights anywhere. Must have gone out while he was inside. Looks like it. "Then you should stay here tonight." Mason blinked. "What?" "Stay here. I have guest rooms." Plural. "You can take your pick." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was offering him a stick of gum. "The weather service is saying the worst of the storm won't hit until after 2 a.m. If you try to drive across town to your mother's now, you'll probably end up in a ditch." "I wasn't planning to drive to my mother's tonight. I was just going to sleep at my place." "With no power? In this cold?" Scarlett shook her head. "You'll freeze. I have blankets. I've survived worse." "I'm sure you have, but you don't have to." She held his gaze. "Look, I know this is weird. We just met. You're a stranger. I'm a stranger. And accepting overnight hospitality from strangers is generally a bad idea. But it's 1:30 in the morning in a blizzard, your power is out, and I have more empty bedrooms than I know what to do with. So just stay, please." There was something in that last word, please, that got him. A loneliness that matched his own. A need for human connection that she was trying very hard to disguise as practical concern. Mason knew he should say no. Should trudge next door to his cold, dark house and tough it out under every blanket he owned. That would be the sensible thing to do. The safe thing. But Emma's voice echoed in his head. "Life's too short to always take the safe option, Mason. Sometimes you have to trust people." "Okay," he heard himself say. "Yeah, okay, thank you." Scarlett's smile was small but genuine. "Come on, I'll show you where everything is." She led him upstairs to a guest room that was roughly the size of his entire first floor. The bed was massive, covered in what felt like actual clouds disguised as blankets. There was an ensuite bathroom with a shower that had more nozzles than seemed strictly necessary. "Towels are in the cabinet," Scarlett said, hovering in the doorway. "And I'll find you something to sleep in. You can't be comfortable in those work clothes." "I've slept in worse." "I believe you, but you don't have to tonight." She disappeared and returned a few minutes later with a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt. "These might be big, but they're clean. There's a washer and dryer on this floor if you want to wash your clothes." "You don't have to." "I know." She cut him off with a small smile. "But I'm going to anyway. Stop fighting me on this." Mason took the clothes. "Thank you, really." "You're welcome." She turned to leave, then paused. "Mason?" "Yeah? I'm glad you stopped. For the purse. I'm glad we met." Before he could respond, she was gone, her footsteps fading down the hallway. Mason stood alone in the guest room, holding borrowed clothes and wondering what the hell had just happened. He'd gone from working on a car to sitting in a billionaire's living room to accepting overnight hospitality from a woman whose last name he'd only learned an hour ago. Emma would have loved this. She'd always said he needed to be more spontaneous, to stop overthinking everything and just let life happen. He showered in water hot enough to scald, washing away the grime and cold and exhaustion. The sweatpants Scarlett had given him were too big. He had to tie them tight to keep them up. But the fabric was soft and smelled like expensive detergent. He should have been uncomfortable, should have been wary. Instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Safe. Outside, the storm howled and the snow piled higher, burying the city under a white blanket that would take days to melt. But inside Scarlett Whitmore's house, in a guest room that cost more than most people's cars, Mason Reed fell asleep within minutes of his head hitting the pillow. He didn't dream. In another part of the house, Scarlett sat in her own bedroom, staring out at the storm and wondering why she'd invited a stranger to stay the night. It went against every rule she'd set for herself when she'd moved to Chicago 6 months ago. No connections, no attachments, no letting anyone get close enough to hurt her. But there was something about Mason Reed that had bypassed all her defenses. Maybe it was the way he'd stood on her doorstep, bleeding and soaked and holding her purse like it was the most natural thing in the world to return a stranger's lost property in the middle of a blizzard. Maybe it was the fact that he'd talked about his dead wife with the kind of raw honesty that people usually hid behind platitudes. Maybe it was simply that he'd looked at her and seen a person instead of a dollar sign, or a stepping stone, or a target. Whatever it was, she had felt something shift when their eyes met, something that scared her and thrilled her in equal measure. Scarlett Whitmore sits, tech billionaire, CEO of one of the fastest-growing software companies in the world, woman who'd been on the cover of Forbes 3 times before her 30th birthday, climbed into her empty bed in her empty mansion and fell asleep thinking about the mechanic in the guest room down the hall. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the space between storm and shelter, between stranger and something more, 2 broken people found an unexpected moment of peace. Neither of them knew it yet, but that moment would change everything. Morning came with the kind of silence that only happens after heavy snow. No cars, no wind, just the muffled quiet of a city buried under 2 feet of white. Mason woke disoriented, staring at a ceiling he didn't recognize. For a confused moment, he thought he was still dreaming, but then the previous night came back in fragments. The purse, the door, Scarlett's green eyes studying him like he was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. He checked his phone. 7:23 a.m. 12 missed calls from his mother and a string of increasingly worried text messages. Shit, he muttered, sitting up too fast. His head spun for a second before clearing. He called her back. She answered on the first ring. Mason Alexander Reed, where the hell are you? I'm fine, Ma. I'm safe. That's not what I asked. Lily's been asking about you since 6:30. She thinks you're dead in a snowbank somewhere. Guilt twisted in Mason's stomach. Let me talk to her. There was rustling, then Lily's small voice came through. Daddy? Hey, Ladybug. I'm okay. Grandma said the storm was really bad and you didn't come get me. Her voice had that tremor in it that meant she was trying not to cry. Are you hurt? No, baby. I'm not hurt. The roads were too dangerous to drive last night, so I stayed somewhere safe. But I'm coming to get you soon, okay? Promise? Promise. Have I ever broken a promise to you? No. She sounded a little better. Grandma made pancakes. Did she put chocolate chips in them? And whipped cream. Lucky. Save me one? Okay. Love you, Daddy. Love you more, Ladybug. His mother came back on the line. Where are you really? I told you, somewhere safe. Mason. I'm next door at the neighbor's place. My power went out and she offered me a guest room. There was a pause that lasted several centuries. She, his mother said finally, don't start. I'm not starting anything. I'm just surprised. You haven't so much as looked at another woman since Emma died. I'm not looking at anyone. She was being neighborly. That's it. Uh-huh. His mother didn't sound convinced. Well, the plows are supposed to start on the side streets around 10. You can probably make it over here by noon. I'll be there. After he hung up, Mason found his work clothes folded neatly on a chair, clean and still warm from the dryer. He stared at them for a long moment. Scarlett must have washed them while he slept. The gesture felt intimate in a way that made him uncomfortable and grateful in equal measure. He dressed quickly, trying to shake off the strangeness of the situation. This was just what it was. A stranger helping another stranger during a storm. Nothing more complicated than that. The house was quiet as he made his way downstairs. He half expected Scarlett to still be asleep, but he found her in the kitchen, standing at the counter with a cup of coffee in both hands, staring out at the snow-covered street. She changed into jeans and a sweater that looked cashmere and probably cost more than his mortgage payment. Her hair was down now, falling past her shoulders in dark waves. Without the exhaustion of the previous night shadowing her face, she looked different, younger, maybe, or just less guarded. Morning, Mason said. She turned, and something flickered across her expression before settling into a small smile. Morning. Coffee? Please. She poured him a cup without asking how he took it. She'd remembered from last night. Another small gesture that felt bigger than it should. How'd you sleep? She asked. Better than I have in months, honestly. Mason took a sip of coffee. It was perfect. That bed is ridiculous. I know, I can never sleep in mine, but the guest room seemed to work fine for everyone else. She said it like a joke, but Mason heard the loneliness underneath. You washed my clothes. I did. Hope that's okay. They were pretty disgusting. Yeah, sorry about that. Don't be. I've seen worse. She nodded toward the windows. Looks like we got about 2 feet, maybe more in the drifts. City will take days to dig out. Probably. Scarlett sipped her coffee. You have somewhere you need to be? I need to pick up my daughter. My mother's been watching her. Right. Lily. The fact that she remembered his daughter's name did something strange to Mason's chest. Yeah. The news said main road should be passable by mid-morning. Side streets might take longer. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the snow glitter in the early morning sunlight. It was a companionable silence, the kind that should have felt awkward between two people who barely knew each other but somehow didn't. I should make breakfast, Scarlett said abruptly. You hungry? I don't want to impose. You're not. I was going to make something anyway. She moved to the refrigerator. How do you feel about pancakes? Lily would say they're only acceptable with chocolate chips. Smart kid. Scarlett pulled out ingredients with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. You can sit or you can help. Your choice. Mason chose help. They worked together in an easy rhythm that surprised them both. Mason measuring flour while Scarlett whisked eggs, their movements synchronized without discussion. The kitchen filled with the smell of vanilla and melting butter. So, Scarlett said, pouring batter onto the griddle. Auto mechanic. How'd you get into that? My dad. He ran a shop in Cicero until he retired. I grew up basically living there. Started changing oil when I was 12, rebuilding engines by 16. Mason shrugged. It was always the plan. Take over the family business. Did you? For a while. Then he had a stroke and had to sell. I saved enough to buy my own place a few years later. He paused. Smaller operation. Just me and Tommy now. You said business was struggling. Mason glanced at her, surprised she remembered. Yeah, not great at the business part. Good at fixing cars. Terrible at charging people what the work is actually worth. Because of customers like the 70-year-old grandmother. Because of customers like a lot of people. I grew up without much. I know what it's like to need your car fixed and not have the money. Hard to turn those people away. Scarlett flipped a pancake with more force than necessary. That's a good way to go bankrupt. Tell me about it. So why do you keep doing it? Mason thought about that. Because Emma would have. She was always the one who saw people, really saw them. She'd be furious with me if I started turning away people who needed help just to make the bottom line look better. She sounds like she was a good person. She was. Best person I ever knew. The familiar ache settled in his chest, duller now than it had been, but still there. She made me better. And when she died, I promised myself I wouldn't lose that. Wouldn't become the kind of person who only cares about profit margins and bank statements. Even if it costs you everything? Even then. Scarlett slid a plate of pancakes in front of him. They were perfect. Golden brown, fluffy, with chocolate chips melted just right. You're either very principled or very stupid. Probably a little of both. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The pancakes were good, really good, and Mason found himself wondering what other contradictions Scarlett Whitmore contained. A billionaire who lived alone in a mansion but made pancakes from scratch. A tech CEO who washed a stranger's grease-stained clothes in the middle of the night. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. Last night you said you work in tech, software. Yeah. What kind of software? Scarlett's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Enterprise solutions. Cloud infrastructure, mostly. Data management systems for large corporations. It sounded rehearsed, like an answer she'd given 1,000 times at cocktail parties and conference rooms. That sounds... Mason searched for a polite word. Boring? Scarlett supplied. I was going to say complex. It's both. She set down her fork. It's also not entirely true. Well, it is true. That is what my company does. But there's more to it than that. You don't have to tell me. I know. She met his eyes. But I want to. I think. Mason waited. My company is called Whitmore Tech. You've probably never heard of it because we don't do consumer products, but we provide back-end infrastructure for about 40% of the Fortune 500. When you check your bank balance or book a flight or order something online, there's a decent chance our software is running in the background making it happen. Sounds successful. It is. We're valued at about $8 billion. Went public 3 years ago. I own about 30% of the stock, which makes me... She paused. Well, it makes me extremely wealthy. The number hung in the air between them. 8 billion. Mason couldn't even conceptualize that much money. It was abstract, theoretical, completely divorced from the world he lived in, where $237 in his checking account was enough to keep him awake at night. Wow, he said finally. Yeah. Scarlett's smile was thin. Wow. So why are you here, in this neighborhood, I mean? You could live anywhere. That's exactly why I'm here. Because I could live anywhere, and everywhere I went, people knew who I was, what I was worth, what they could get from me. She pushed her pancakes around her plate. 6 months ago, I had a breakdown. Not a big dramatic one, just a quiet moment in my penthouse in San Francisco when I realized I couldn't remember the last time someone had a conversation with me without wanting something. An investment, a job, a connection, an introduction. Even people I thought were friends turned out to be networking. That sounds lonely. It was. It is. She looked up at him. So I bought this place under an LLC, told everyone I was taking a sabbatical, and moved to Chicago where nobody knows me. I work remotely, attend board meetings via video, and spend my evenings watching Netflix alone in a $3 million house. Sounds like you traded one kind of lonely for another. At least this kind is honest. Scarlett stood, carrying her plate to the sink. At least here, when I'm alone, I know it's because I chose it, not because everyone around me is performing friendship while calculating my net worth. Mason joined her at the sink. They washed dishes together, another small moment of domestic synchronicity that felt larger than it should. I get it, he said. After Emma died, everyone wanted to help. But what they really wanted was to feel like they'd done something, to check a box that said they'd been there for the grieving widower. After a while, you learn to tell the difference between people who actually care and people who just want to be able to say they cared. And how many people actually cared? My mother, Tommy, a couple of guys from the shop. Mason dried a plate. That's about it. Quality over quantity, something like that. They finished the dishes. Outside, the sound of snowplows rumbled in the distance. The real world was coming back, pushing into the strange bubble they'd created overnight. I should get going, Mason said, but he didn't move. Yeah, Scarlett agreed, but she didn't move either. They stood there in her kitchen, the morning light streaming through the windows, and for a moment Mason felt like he was standing on the edge of something. A choice, maybe. Or a chance. Something that would matter later in ways he couldn't predict. Thank you, he said. For last night. For this morning. For... He gestured vaguely at the kitchen, the house, the space between them. All of it. You already thanked me when you returned my purse in a blizzard. That was just being decent. So was this. Mason smiled. Want to walk me out? They made their way to the front door. Mason's Explorer sat in his driveway next door, already half buried in snow. It would take him 20 minutes just to dig it out. Mason, Scarlett said as he stepped onto the porch. He turned back. She looked like she was wrestling with something, the same internal debate he'd watched play across her face when she'd invited him to stay the night. Caution warring with something else, some need that was stronger than self-preservation. Would you want to have dinner sometime? The words came out in a rush. I mean, as neighbors, to thank you properly for the purse. Mason should have said no, should have recognized this for what it was, a complication he didn't need, a connection that could only end badly. She was a billionaire CEO living in hiding. He was a broke mechanic with a 7-year-old daughter and enough emotional baggage to fill a warehouse, but Emma's voice was in his head again. Sometimes you have to trust people. I'd like that, he said. Scarlett's smile was genuine this time, reaching her eyes. Friday? 7? It's a date. Then he realized what he'd said. I mean, not a date, just, I know what you meant. She was trying not to laugh. Go. Your daughter's waiting. Mason trudged through the snow to his car, hyper-aware of Scarlett watching from her doorway. He dug out the Explorer, started the engine, and pulled away with a wave. In his rearview mirror, he saw her standing there until he turned the corner. The drive to his mother's took 45 minutes instead of the usual 15. The city was still half buried, cars abandoned on side streets, snow piled in drifts that reached the sidewalk signs. But the main roads had been cleared, and Mason made it there in one piece. Lily met him at the door, launching herself into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him over. "Daddy!" "Hey, Ladybug." He squeezed her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and his mother's house, coffee and cinnamon and home. "Miss me?" "So much. Grandma said you were stuck in the snow and I thought maybe you froze and died like in that movie." "What movie?" "The one where the boy is outside and he turns into ice." "We need to monitor what you're watching." Mason set her down. "I'm fine, just stayed somewhere safe during the storm." His mother appeared in the hallway, arms crossed, wearing the expression that meant she had questions and wouldn't be satisfied with vague answers. "Hi, Ma." "Don't hi, Mommy. Get in here." Lily ran off to finish the cartoon she'd been watching. Mason followed his mother into the kitchen where she poured him coffee without asking and pointed at a chair. "Sit. Talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "You spent the night at a woman's house." "I spent the night in a guest room because my power was out and the roads were impassable." "Uh-huh." His mother studied him. "What's her name?" "Scarlett." "And?" "And what? She's my neighbor. She was being nice." "You like her?" "I don't know her well enough to like her." "That's not what I asked." His mother leaned against the counter. "You have that look." "What look?" "What?" "The look you had when you first met Emma. Like someone just turned a light on in a dark room and you're not sure if you should be excited or terrified." Mason stared into his coffee. His mother was too observant for her own good. Or his. "It doesn't matter," he said. "She's way out of my league. She works in tech, lives in a $3 million house, probably dates CEOs and venture capitalists. And you're a single father with a struggling business who smells like motor oil and has $60 in his checking account." "It's 237, but yeah, basically." His mother was quiet for a moment. "Emma wouldn't want you to be alone forever." "I'm not alone. I have Lily." "You know what I mean." "Ma, I'm just saying. 3 years is a long time. And from the way you're talking about this woman, it sounds like maybe she's the first person since Emma who's made you feel something other than tired and sad." Mason wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Because she was right. Sitting in Scarlett's kitchen making pancakes, washing dishes side by side, watching the morning light catch in her hair. He'd felt something. Not the overwhelming, all-consuming love he'd had with Emma, but something, a spark, a possibility. "I'm having dinner with her Friday," he heard himself say. His mother smiled. "Good. It's not a date, if you say so." "I mean it. We're just neighbors being neighborly." "Mason, honey, I've been married for 40 years. I know the difference between neighborly and interested, and you're interested." Before he could respond, Lily burst back into the kitchen. "Daddy, can we make snow angels?" "Sure, Ladybug. Let me finish my coffee first." She bounced on her toes, too excited to stand still. "Will you teach me how to make a snow fort, too?" "If there's enough snow, which there definitely is." Lily ran off again, probably to find her winter clothes. His mother refilled his coffee. "Be careful," she said quietly. "With what?" "With your heart. I know you think it's been dead for 3 years, but it's not. It's just been sleeping, and when it wakes up, it's going to hurt before it feels good. That's how these things work." Mason didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He finished his coffee, bundled Lily into her winter gear, and spent the next 2 hours building snow forts and making angels and having a snowball fight that left them both soaked and laughing. But the whole time, part of his mind was next door. Wondering what Scarlett was doing, whether she was watching the snow, whether she was thinking about Friday, whether this feeling in his chest was hope or stupidity, or some dangerous combination of both. The week crawled by. Mason threw himself into work, trying to catch up on the backlog that had accumulated during the storm. 2 transmissions, an engine rebuild, and a dozen oil changes kept him busy enough that he could almost forget about Friday night. Almost. Tommy noticed something was different. "You seem weird," he said Wednesday afternoon while they were replacing brake pads on a Honda Accord. "I'm not weird." You're whistling. You never whistle. I whistle sometimes. Name one time. Mason couldn't. See? Weird. Tommy tightened a lug nut. Is this about a woman? No. It's totally about a woman. Who is she? There's no woman. Liar. Come on, man. I've worked for you for 2 years. You've been basically a robot the entire time. Work, Lily, sleep, repeat. Now suddenly you're whistling, and you shaved this morning, and you're wearing a shirt that isn't covered in grease stains. Mason looked down at his shirt. It was clean. He had shaved. Damn it. It's nothing, just dinner with a neighbor. Tommy's eyes went wide. Holy shit, you have a date. It's not a date. That's what people always say when it's definitely a date. Tommy grinned. Good for you, man. Seriously, it's about time. Don't make it into something it's not. Too late. I'm already making it into something. What's her name? Scarlett. Nice. What does she do? She works in tech. Hot tech girl. Even better. You guys meet on an app? She lives next door. The mansion? The one that sold for like $3 million? Mason didn't answer, which was answer enough. Tommy whistled low. Damn. Shooting above your weight class. I respect it. It's not like that. Sure it's not. But maybe it was. Mason couldn't stop thinking about her. About the way she'd looked in the kitchen that morning, sunlight streaming through the windows. About the sadness in her voice when she'd talked about her lonely penthouse in San Francisco. About the way she'd smiled when he'd agreed to dinner. Thursday night, he stood in front of his closet for 20 minutes, trying to figure out what to wear to a not date with a billionaire. Everything he owned was either work clothes or clothes that were too old to be work clothes. He finally settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt that was only slightly wrinkled. You look nice, Daddy, Lily said from his bedroom doorway. Thanks, Ladybug. Are you going on a date? Where did you hear that? Grandma told me. Grandma needs to mind her own business. She said you're having dinner with the pretty lady next door. Mason turned around. When did you see the lady next door? Yesterday. She was getting her mail when we came home from school. She smiled at me. Lily climbed onto his bed. Is she your girlfriend? No, baby. She's just a friend. But you like her. I don't really know her yet. But when you know her, will you like her? Mason sat down next to his daughter. Maybe. Would that be okay with you? Lily thought about it, her face serious. I don't want you to forget Mommy. Oh, Ladybug, Mason pulled her close. I could never forget Mommy. Not ever. She was the most important person in the world to me, and she gave me you, which makes her even more special. But Mommy wouldn't want me to be sad forever. She'd want me to be happy. To maybe find someone to be happy with. Would the lady be nice to me? I think so. But if she wasn't, I wouldn't see her anymore. You're the most important person in my life, Lily. Always. Nobody and nothing will ever change that. Lily hugged him. Okay, you can have dinner with her. Thanks for the permission. You're welcome. She pulled back. Can I have ice cream? Nice try. It's a school night. Worth a shot. Friday arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made Mason feel like a teenager again. He spent the day at the shop trying to focus on work and failing spectacularly. He nearly stripped a bolt head, overfilled a coolant reservoir, and misdiagnosed a check engine light. Go home, Tommy said finally. You're a disaster today. I have 2 more hours. And in those 2 hours, you're going to cost us more in mistakes than we'll make in labor. Go, shower, put on cologne or whatever. Try not to screw this up. Mason went. At 6:30, freshly showered and wearing his least wrinkled shirt, he stood in his kitchen trying to decide if bringing wine was appropriate. Was this a wine situation? Would Scarlett think he was trying too hard? Would she think he was cheap if he didn't bring anything? He was overthinking this. He grabbed the bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. Nothing fancy, just a decent red that his mother had given him last Christmas, and walked next door before he could talk himself out of it. Scarlett answered on the second knock. She wore black jeans and a deep blue sweater that made her eyes look even greener. Her hair was down, and she wore just enough makeup to look polished without looking like she'd tried too hard. She looked beautiful. Hi, Mason said, then immediately felt stupid. I brought wine. If that's weird, I can take it back. It's not weird. Come in. She stepped aside, smiling. You clean up nice. So do you. They stood in the entryway for a moment, both suddenly awkward in a way they hadn't been during the storm. "So," Scarlett said. "So," Mason echoed. She laughed, and the tension broke. "Come on. I made dinner, or tried to. No promises on how edible it is." The kitchen smelled incredible, garlic and herbs and something baking. The table was set for two, candles already lit. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble," Mason said. "I wanted to. Besides, it's been a while since I cooked for someone who isn't me." She poured them each a glass of wine. "I made chicken piccata, or my version of it, and salad, and bread that I definitely didn't make because I can't bake to save my life." They sat down to eat, and the awkwardness faded as they fell into conversation. Mason told her about his week, the transmission that had given him hell, the customer who'd tried to argue that oil changes were a scam invented by Big Automotive, Tommy's disastrous attempt to ask out the girl who worked at the coffee shop next door. Scarlett talked about her work, carefully, like she was testing how much he wanted to know, about a product launch that had gone sideways, about a board member who was pushing her to expand into markets she wasn't sure about the constant pressure to grow, to scale, to be bigger and better and more profitable. "Do you like it?" Mason asked. "The work, I mean." Scarlett considered the question. "I used to, when it was just me and two other people in a garage building something because we thought it was interesting, before the investors and the board meetings and the quarterly earnings calls. Now it's—" She paused. "It's like I built this thing and then it grew too big for me to control, and everyone expects me to have all the answers, but half the time I'm just making it up as I go. That's how I feel about parenting." She smiled. "How's Lily doing? With everything?" "She's good, resilient, probably more than I give her credit for." Mason swirled his wine. "She asked me today if you were my girlfriend." "What did you tell her?" "That we're friends. That I don't really know you yet." "But you want to." It wasn't a question. Mason met her eyes. "Yeah, I do." Scarlett was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "I haven't done this in a long time. The getting to know someone thing, and when I did, it usually ended badly. People wanted the CEO, not the person, or they wanted what they thought the CEO could do for them. I don't want anything from you." "I know. That's what scares me." "Why?" "Because it means this might actually be real, and if it's real, I can actually get hurt." Mason understood that. The fear of opening up again, of letting someone in, of risking the kind of pain that comes from loss. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "I haven't felt anything close to this since Emma, and part of me feels guilty even being here, like I'm betraying her memory." "Are you?" "No, I don't think so. She'd probably be pissed at me for waiting 3 years. He smiled sadly. "But that doesn't make it less terrifying." Scarlett reached across the table. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining. "So we're both terrified," she said. "Looks like it." "Want to be terrified together?" Mason laughed despite himself. Yeah, I think I do." They finished dinner talking about smaller things, favorite movies, worst jobs, childhood pets. By the time they moved to the living room with fresh glasses of wine, the fear had shifted into something else. Not gone, but manageable. A weight they were learning to carry together. Mason didn't leave until almost midnight, and when he did, Scarlett walked him to the door and kissed his cheek, brief and soft. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "Thank you for cooking. We should do this again." "Yeah, we really should." Mason floated home, his head full of wine and possibility. He fell asleep thinking about green eyes and the way Scarlett's laugh sounded when she forgot to be guarded. Neither of them knew it yet, but they'd just started something that would change everything. Something worth fighting for. Something that would be tested in ways neither of them could predict. But for now, in the quiet space between fear and hope, they had this. And this was enough. The second dinner happened 3 days later. Then another 4 days after that. Before Mason quite understood how it had happened, seeing Scarlett had become the part of his week he looked forward to most. They fell into a rhythm that felt natural despite how unnatural it should have been. Mason would finish work, pick up Lily from his mother's, make dinner for his daughter, read her stories until she fell asleep. Then he'd slip next door to Scarlett's massive house where they'd talk until midnight about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up in Michigan, daughter of an airplane mechanic and a high school teacher. about writing her first lines of code at 13 on a computer her father had rebuilt from scrap parts, about the scholarship to MIT that had changed her life trajectory completely. He told her about Emma, not just the sanitized version he gave most people, but the real story, how they'd met at a coffee shop when he'd spilled an entire latte down her white shirt, how she'd laughed instead of getting angry, how she'd died slowly enough that he'd had time to say goodbye, but quickly enough that there hadn't been time to prepare. "I was so angry," Mason said one night in early February, staring into his wine glass. "For months after. Angry at her for leaving, at the universe for taking her, at myself for not being able to fix it. You can rebuild a transmission, but you can't rebuild a person." Did the anger go away? Not exactly. It just became part of the background noise, like tinnitus. Always there, but you learn to ignore it most of the time. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. "My ex-fiancé cheated on me with my best friend." Mason looked up sharply. She'd never mentioned an ex, let alone a fiancé. 2 years ago, she continued, right after we went public, I was working 80-hour weeks trying to keep everything from falling apart, and he was sleeping with the woman I'd known since college, the woman who'd been my maid of honor at our engagement party. Her smile was bitter. Found out when I came home early from a conference and walked in on them in my bed. Jesus. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was realizing that everyone else had known. My assistant, my board members, half my employees. They'd all known for months and nobody said anything because they didn't want to upset me during a critical time for the company. She drained her glass. That's when I learned that being rich means people lie to you. They tell you what they think you want to hear, or what benefits them most, but rarely the truth. Is that why you left San Francisco? Partly. I couldn't be in that penthouse anymore. Couldn't look at any of those people without wondering what else they were hiding from me. Couldn't trust my own judgment about who was real and who was performing. She looked at him. You're the first person in 2 years who's treated me like a regular human being. You are a regular human being. Not according to Forbes or Bloomberg or any of the 1,000 other publications that write about me like I'm some kind of mythical creature. She poured them both more wine. Do you know what it's like to Google yourself and find 100 articles analyzing your body language in board meetings? Or speculating about your personal life based on what you ordered for lunch? Mason thought about his life. About struggling to make rent and worrying whether Lily's winter coat would last another season. About the anonymity of being nobody important. No, he said honestly. I don't. That sounds like hell. It is. It's also incredibly isolating, because nobody wants to hear a billionaire complain about the downsides of being a billionaire. It's the world's tiniest violin. I'm listening. Yeah. Scarlett met his eyes. You are. That's new. They didn't kiss that night, or the night after. But the air between them was charged with possibility, with the weight of two people circling something they both wanted but were afraid to reach for. The shift happened on a Saturday in mid-February. Mason had brought Lily next door for the first time, nervous about how his two worlds would collide. But Scarlett had surprised him by getting down on the floor to play with Lily's collection of plastic dinosaurs, creating elaborate prehistoric scenarios with a creativity that made his daughter shriek with laughter. The T-Rex says your kitchen drawer is broken, Lily announced, holding up a small plastic figure. Does he? Scarlett played along. That's very observant of him. Daddy can fix it. Daddy fixes everything. Mason had noticed the drawer 3 weeks ago, one of the lower cabinets that stuck when you tried to open it. He'd mentioned it once and then forgotten about it. I don't want to impose, Scarlett started. It'll take 5 minutes, Mason said. You got tools? Somewhere, I think, maybe. He found a basic toolkit in her garage, buried under boxes that had never been unpacked. The drawer needed a new slide mechanism, which he could install on Monday after picking one up from the hardware store. You don't have to do that, Scarlett said, watching him examine the broken hardware. I know, but it's bothering me now that I've seen it. The compulsion to fix things. Exactly. While he worked, Scarlett and Lily moved to the kitchen table where they were drawing pictures. Mason could hear his daughter chattering away, telling Scarlett about her school and her friends and the boy in her class who ate paste. Why does he eat paste? Scarlett asked, genuinely curious. I don't know. Tommy says some people are just weird. Who's Tommy? He works at Daddy's shop. He's nice, but he says bad words sometimes, and Daddy tells him to watch his mouth. Does your daddy say bad words? Only when he hits his thumb with a hammer. Mason looked up to find Scarlett grinning at him. Is that true? I plead the fifth. They ordered pizza for dinner. Lily insisted on showing Scarlett her favorite movie, some animated thing about talking animals that Mason had seen approximately 400 times. He expected Scarlett to be bored, to check her phone or make excuses. Instead, she sat on the couch with Lily curled against her side, asking questions about the plot and laughing at the jokes. Mason watched them from the kitchen, something in his chest going tight. This was what he'd lost when Emma died. Not just a wife, but a partner. Someone to share the small moments with. Someone who could make Lily laugh. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep on the couch and Mason had carried her home and put her to bed, he returned to find Scarlett cleaning up the pizza boxes and cups. You don't have to do that, he said. I know, but I'm going to anyway. She turned to face him. She's great, Mason, really. You're doing an amazing job with her. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. That's called parenting, or so I'm told. Scarlett leaned against the counter. She loves you. You can see it in everything she does. The way she talks about you, looks at you. You're her whole world. She's mine. They stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen where they'd made pancakes that first morning, where they'd washed dishes and talked about loneliness and second chances. But something felt different now, more intense, like they'd been dancing around each other for weeks and had finally run out of room. Mason, Scarlett said quietly. He closed the distance between them, not thinking, just moving on instinct. Yeah? I really want to kiss you right now. That's convenient, because I really want to kiss you too. So why aren't we? Because I'm scared. Me too. What if we screw this up? Then we screw it up. Scarlett reached for his hand. But what if we don't? Mason kissed her, soft at first, testing, giving her space to pull away. But she didn't pull away. She leaned into him, her hands coming up to his face, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Scarlett rested her forehead against his. Okay, she said. Okay? We're doing this, whatever this is. We're doing it. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Mason laughed. That's the spirit. They kissed again, slower this time, learning the shape of each other. Mason's hands found her waist. Scarlett's fingers threaded through his hair. The world outside disappeared until it was just the two of them, and this moment that felt both fragile and inevitable. I should go, Mason said eventually, though he made no move to leave. Probably. Lily's alone. She is. I'll see you tomorrow? You better. Mason kissed her one more time before forcing himself toward the door. He made it 3 steps before turning back. Scarlett? Yeah? This is real, right? I'm not imagining it? She smiled, soft and genuine. It's real. The next few weeks were the happiest Mason had been in 3 years. He and Scarlett tried to keep things low-key, mindful of Lily and the neighbors and the general weirdness of the situation. But it was hard to hide the way he smiled now, the way he hummed while working, the way he checked his phone constantly for her texts. Tommy noticed immediately. You're getting laid, he announced one Tuesday morning. Jesus, Tommy, there's a customer 15 feet away. Sorry, you're romantically involved with someone. That's not better. But I'm right, Tommy grinned. Good for you, man. You deserve this. The problem was that as happy as Mason felt, the logistics were becoming increasingly complicated. Scarlett worked from home, but her schedule was chaotic. Conference calls at odd hours, urgent fires that needed putting out, board meetings that stretched for hours. Mason had the garage and Lily and a life that didn't leave much room for spontaneity. They stole time where they could. Early mornings when Lily was at school and Mason could slip away for coffee. Late nights after his daughter was asleep. Weekends when his mother could watch Lily for a few hours. But it wasn't enough. Mason wanted more. Wanted to take Scarlett to dinner at a real restaurant, not just eat takeout in her kitchen. Wanted to hold her hand in public. Wanted to integrate her into his life instead of keeping her in a separate box labeled too good to be true. The first crack in their bubble appeared in early March. Mason had taken Lily to Scarlett's house for Sunday brunch, their new tradition. Scarlett had learned to make French toast the way Lily liked it, with cinnamon and powdered sugar. They were sitting at the kitchen table, Lily chattering about her upcoming school play, when Scarlett's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her expression changed. Closed off. "I need to take this," she said, standing. "I'll be right back." She disappeared into her office. Mason tried to focus on Lily's story about how she'd been cast as a tree in the school production, but he could hear Scarlett's voice through the door. Not the words, but the tone. Sharp. Frustrated. When she came back 10 minutes later, her face was tight. "Everything okay?" Mason asked. "Fine. Just work stuff." But her smile didn't reach her eyes. Lily, with the emotional radar of children everywhere, went quiet. "Are you sad?" "No, sweetie, just tired." Scarlett sat back down, but the easy warmth from earlier was gone. Mason waited until Lily was distracted by her tablet before asking quietly, "What happened?" "One of our major clients is threatening to pull their contract. Something about security concerns that are actually just leverage to renegotiate their rates." Scarlett rubbed her temples. "It's all nonsense, but I have to fly to New York tomorrow to deal with it in person." "How long will you be gone?" 3 days, maybe 4. It shouldn't have bothered him. 3 days was nothing, but Mason felt the distance opening between them like a physical thing. "I'll miss you," he said. "I'll miss you too." Scarlett left Monday morning before dawn. She texted him from the airport, from the plane, from her hotel in Manhattan. But the texts grew shorter and less frequent as the days went on. Mason tried not to read into it, tried to remind himself that she was dealing with a crisis and didn't have time for constant communication. But by Wednesday night, sitting alone in his house after putting Lily to bed, he felt the old familiar loneliness creeping back in. The kind that made him wonder if this whole thing had been a mistake, if he'd let himself hope for something that was always going to be temporary. His phone rang at 11 p.m. Scarlett. "Hey," he answered. "Did I wake you?" "No, I was just—" He looked around his empty living room. "Sitting here. Productive. How's New York?" "Exhausting. I've been in meetings for 14 hours straight and I still haven't solved anything." She sounded drained. "I hate this. All of it. The posturing, the negotiations, the fake smiles." "Then why do you do it?" "Because 2,000 people work for my company. They have mortgages and kids and lives that depend on me not screwing this up. So I smile and negotiate and pretend I care about profit margins when all I really want is to be back in Chicago making French toast with your daughter." Mason felt something ease in his chest. "She misses you. Asked me today when Miss Scarlett was coming home." "Miss Scarlett? She's never called me that before." "Yeah, well, I think you've been upgraded to important person status." Scarlett was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "What about you? Do you miss me?" "Every minute." "Good, because I'm coming home tomorrow instead of Friday. I don't care what my lawyers say. I'll deal with this remotely." "You don't have to do that for me." "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. Because being here, pretending to be this person I used to be, is making me miserable. And for the first time in years, I have something worth going home to." Mason smiled despite himself. "We'll be here." "I know, that's the best part." Scarlett came back Thursday afternoon. Mason met her at the door with Lily, who launched herself at Scarlett with enough force to nearly knock her over. "You're back," Lily squealed. "I am. Did you miss me?" "So much. Daddy was sad without you." "Lily," Mason warned, but Scarlett was smiling. "Was he?" He kept checking his phone and sighing. "That's enough, Ladybug." "It's okay," Scarlett said, her eyes on Mason. "I was doing the same thing." They ordered Chinese food and ate it on Scarlett's living room floor, while Lily told her everything that had happened in the 4 days she'd been gone. The boy who ate paste had moved on to eating erasers. Her best friend had gotten a new puppy. She'd learned a new song in music class. After dinner, Mason sent Lily home to do her homework while he helped Scarlett clean up. She was quieter than usual, moving through her kitchen like she was still half in New York. "Talk to me," Mason said. "I'm fine." "Scarlett." She stopped, her hands braced against the counter. "Being there reminded me of why I left. The person I have to be in that world. The decisions I have to make that affect people's lives. The constant pressure to be perfect, to have all the answers, to never show weakness. You don't have to be that person here." "I know. That's what makes it so hard. Because every time I go back there, I can feel myself slipping into old patterns, and I'm scared that eventually I won't be able to turn it off, that I'll become that person permanently and lose this. She gestured between them. Lose you. Mason moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. Yeah, I do, because I'm not going anywhere, not unless you tell me to. Scarlett turned in his arms. What if my life becomes too much? What if the company demands more time, more travel, more of everything? What if I can't be what you need? Then we'll figure it out. Together. Mason tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm not asking you to choose between me and your company. I'm just asking you to let me be part of your life, whatever that looks like. I don't know how to do this, how to balance everything. Nobody does. We're all just making it up as we go. She kissed him then, hard and desperate, like she was trying to prove something to both of them. Mason kissed her back, pouring 3 years of loneliness and fear into it, all the emotion he'd kept locked up finally finding somewhere to go. When they broke apart, Scarlett was crying. Not big dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that tracked down her face. Sorry, she said, wiping at her eyes. I'm a mess. You're allowed to be a mess. Not in my world. In my world, you're always composed, always in control. Then screw your world. Here you can fall apart if you need to. She laughed through her tears. How did I get so lucky? I ask myself the same question every day. They stood in her kitchen, holding each other while the last of the daylight faded outside. It wasn't perfect. Neither of them were. But it was real, and for now, that was enough. The next few weeks tested them in small ways. A kitchen drawer Mason had fixed broke again, and he spent an hour fixing it properly, teaching Scarlett how to maintain it herself. Lily got sick with the flu, and Mason had to cancel their plans 3 nights in a row. Scarlett had another crisis at work that kept her glued to her laptop for 16 hours straight. But they weathered each small storm, learning how to communicate when things got hard instead of retreating into their separate corners, learning to ask for help, learning to trust that the other person wouldn't disappear when things got complicated. In April, Mason took a leap. Lily's school play was coming up, and he asked Scarlett if she wanted to come. To watch her be a tree, Scarlett confirmed. The most important tree in the forest, according to her. I wouldn't miss it. The play was exactly as chaotic as expected. Kids forgot their lines, someone's papier-mâché rock fell apart on stage, and Lily delivered her one line. I am a tree, and I am very old, with such dramatic flair that half the audience laughed. But Scarlett sat next to Mason in the uncomfortable auditorium chairs, her hand in his, and cheered louder than anyone when Lily took her bow. Afterward, in the parking lot, Lily threw herself at Scarlett. Did you see me? I didn't forget my words. You were amazing, the best tree I've ever seen. Really? Really. Mason watched them, his daughter and this woman who'd stumbled into their lives during a snowstorm, and felt something shift in his chest. Not the overwhelming grief that had defined him for 3 years, but something warmer, something like hope. That night, after Lily was asleep, he and Scarlett sat on his front porch watching the spring rain. His house, not hers. The one with the sagging porch and peeling paint. I love you, Mason said. The words came out rough, unpracticed. He hadn't said them to anyone except Lily since Emma died. Scarlett turned to look at him, her eyes wide. You don't have to say it back, he added quickly. I just needed you to know. In case... She kissed him, cutting off whatever else he was going to say. I love you too, she said against his lips. I'm terrified, and I have no idea how we're going to make this work long term, and I'm probably going to screw it up somehow. But I love you. You and your broken down garage and your perfect daughter and your compulsion to fix everything. Even when I can't? Especially then. They sat in the rain, holding each other, 2 imperfect people who'd found something worth fighting for. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, they both knew that. But for the first time in years, both of them believed it might be worth the trouble. Mason didn't know it yet, but the real test was coming. The world was about to intrude on their carefully constructed bubble, and when it did, everything they'd built would be put to the test. But tonight, in the rain, with Scarlett's hand in his and the sound of his daughter sleeping peacefully inside, Mason Reed let himself believe in second chances. The photograph appeared online on a Tuesday morning in late May. Mason didn't see it at first. He was under a Subaru, wrestling with a rusted exhaust manifold, when Tommy's voice cut through the sound of the radio. Boss, you need to see this. Little busy, Tommy. No, seriously, you really need to see this. Something in Tommy's tone made Mason slide out from under the car. His employee was staring at his phone, face pale. What? Tommy turned the screen around. It took Mason a moment to process what he was seeing. A photograph. Him and Scarlett, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. They were standing in her driveway, his arms around her waist, her hands on his chest. The image had been snapped mid-kiss, an intimate moment stolen and plastered across some gossip website. The headline read, Tech Billionaire Scarlett Whitmore's Secret Romance with Blue-Collar Boyfriend. Mason's stomach dropped. There's more, Tommy said quietly, scrolling. Like, a lot more. There were 5 photos total. One of them leaving a restaurant together, another of Scarlett playing with Lily in the front yard, a third showing Mason's beat-up Explorer parked in Scarlett's driveway overnight. Each one had a caption more invasive than the last, dissecting every detail. His financial situation, his dead wife, Lily's school, the garage's struggling books, which someone had apparently accessed through public records. How did they... Mason couldn't finish the sentence. Says here a neighbor tipped them off, sold the photos to some celebrity news site. Then it went viral. Tommy looked sick. Man, I'm sorry, this is... Mason's phone started ringing. Unknown number. He ignored it. It rang again immediately. Then again. You should call Scarlett, Tommy said. Mason was already dialing. She answered on the first ring. You saw, she said. Not a question. Yeah. I'm so sorry. Mason, I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful. I should have... This isn't your fault. Of course it's my fault. This is my world. I brought this into your life. Her voice cracked. Into Lily's life. Mason's hands tightened on the phone. Where are you? Home. I've been getting calls all morning. My PR team, the board, reporters. Everyone wants a statement. I'm coming over. You don't have to... I'm coming over. He left Tommy in charge of the garage and drove the 30 seconds next door. Scarlett's house was already being circled by 2 vans with satellite dishes on top. A man with a camera stood on the sidewalk, snapping photos as Mason pulled into the driveway. Mr. Reed, is it true you're dating Scarlett Whitmore? Mason ignored him, using the garage code Scarlett had given him weeks ago to get inside without running the media gauntlet. He found her in the kitchen, staring at her laptop screen, looking like she hadn't slept. Hey, he said softly. She looked up, and he saw fear in her eyes. Real fear, the kind that made his chest ache. This is bad, Mason. This is really bad. He sat down next to her. Show me. The articles had multiplied in the past hour. Every major tech publication, every business journal, half the mainstream media. They all had the same angle. Billionaire CEO Scarlett Whitmore, known for her privacy and her ruthless business acumen, secretly dating a struggling mechanic with a tragic past. The stories painted Mason as either a gold digger or a charity case, and Scarlett as either a fool or slumming it for kicks. Listen to this one, Scarlett said, her voice hollow. She read aloud. Sources close to Whitmore suggest this relationship represents a concerning lapse in judgment for the young CEO, whose company is currently in delicate negotiations with several major clients. Her board of directors is said to be deeply concerned about the optics of their leader dating someone so far removed from the tech world, especially someone with significant financial troubles. That's bullshit, is it? Scarlett met his eyes. Because I got a call an hour ago from Richard Chen, our lead investor. He wanted to know if I was having some kind of breakdown, if this was a cry for help. You're dating someone, that's not a breakdown. In their world it is. In their world, everything is calculated. Who you date, who you're seen with, what restaurants you eat at. It all means something, and dating a mechanic with a kid and debt sends a message that I'm not serious, that I'm unreliable. Mason felt something cold settle in his stomach. So what are you saying? I'm saying I have a board meeting tomorrow, and they're going to ask me to make a choice. Between me and the company. They won't phrase it that way. They'll talk about optics and brand integrity and shareholder confidence. But yes, that's what it comes down to. Mason stood up, pacing to the window. The reporters were still outside, cameras ready, waiting for a story, waiting for someone's life to fall apart so they could document it. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. I built this company from nothing. 8 years of my life, 2,000 employees, billions of dollars in client contracts. I can't just—" She stopped. "But I can't lose you either. You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. Look what they did to us in 24 hours. They published Lily's school, Mason. Her school. I got 3 calls already from reporters asking if they could interview you, asking about your finances, about Emma. They're going to tear us apart piece by piece until there's nothing left." Mason turned back to her. "So we don't let them. How? How do we stop this?" "I don't know yet. But running away isn't the answer. That's what they want. They want you scared and isolated so you'll do what they say." Scarlett laughed bitterly. "You sound like you've dealt with this before." "I haven't, but I've dealt with people trying to control me through fear. After Emma died, everyone had an opinion about how I should raise Lily, how I should grieve, what I should do with my life. And I learned that the only way to survive it is to stop caring what they think. That's easy to say when you're not responsible for 2,000 jobs." "You're right. I don't know what that's like." Mason sat back down, taking her hands. "But I know you, and I know you didn't build a billion-dollar company by letting other people make your decisions." Before Scarlett could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and winced. "It's my mother. You should answer." Scarlett took the call, and Mason watched her face cycle through a dozen emotions as she listened. When she hung up 5 minutes later, she looked defeated. "Let me guess," Mason said. "She's concerned. She's furious. She saw the articles and thinks I'm throwing away everything I've worked for on some—" Scarlett stopped. "On some what?" "It doesn't matter." "Scarlett, she called you my midlife crisis." The words came out flat. "Said I'm acting like a teenager and I need to end this before it destroys my reputation completely." Mason absorbed that. "Is that what you think? That I'm a crisis?" "No, but she's not entirely wrong about the damage this could do." "To your reputation or your company?" "Both. Does it matter?" "Yeah, it does. Because reputation is just what other people think. The company is real. Jobs are real. But if you're making decisions based on what strangers think of you, they're not strangers. They're investors, clients, partners, people whose opinions directly impact whether my company succeeds or fails." "And what about what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter when 2,000 people depend on me." Mason stood up again. "I should go." "Mason, no, you're right. You have responsibilities, real ones, and I'm—" He gestured at himself. "I'm a mechanic with a kid and a struggling business. I'm exactly what everyone's saying I am. A liability." "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" Mason headed for the door. "I'll make this easy for you. You do what you need to do for your company. I'll stay out of the way." "Don't do this. Don't make me the villain here." He stopped, hand on the door. "I'm not making you anything. But I'm also not going to stand here and watch you convince yourself that what we have isn't worth fighting for because some investors think it's bad optics. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is dragging my daughter into the circus because we weren't careful enough. What's not fair is having reporters outside my house taking pictures of a 7-year-old going to school. What's not fair is finding out from a gossip website that apparently my financial situation is public entertainment." Scarlett flinched. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this." Mason opened the door. "Figure out what you want, Scarlett, then let me know." He left before she could respond, pushing past the reporters who shouted questions he didn't answer. By the time he got back to the garage, his phone had 43 missed calls and more text messages than he could count. Tommy took one look at his face and said, "Go home. I'll close up." "It's only 2 o'clock." "I don't care. Go be with Lily." Mason picked up his daughter early from school, ignoring the stares from other parents who'd clearly seen the news. Lily was quiet in the car, more perceptive than he gave her credit for. "Daddy, why were there people with cameras outside our house this morning?" Mason's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "It's complicated, Ladybug. Grandma said it's because Miss Scarlett is famous." "Did she?" "She said famous people have to deal with mean people who want to know all their business." Lily kicked her feet against the car seat. I don't like it. They scared me. Something broke in Mason's chest. I know, baby. I don't like it either. Is Miss Scarlett going to stop being our friend because of the camera people? I don't know. I hope not. I like her. Me too, Ladybug. Me too. His mother was waiting at his house when they got home. She took one look at him and pulled him into a hug while Lily ran inside to watch cartoons. You okay? She asked. No. Stupid question. Sorry. She followed him into the kitchen. I saw the articles. I'm assuming you've talked to Scarlett? Yeah. And? And she's got a board meeting tomorrow where they're going to pressure her to end things, for the good of the company. What are you going to do? Nothing. It's her choice. His mother gave him a look. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard you say. Excuse me? You're just going to let her walk away without fighting for this? What am I supposed to fight, Ma? Her entire world is telling her I'm wrong for her. Her investors, her board, her mother. Who am I to argue? You're the man she loves, that's who. His mother poured them both coffee. But you're also the man who runs away when things get hard. I don't run away. Really? Because it seems to me like the second things got complicated, you walked out her door and told her to figure it out herself. That's not... Mason stopped. She needs to make this decision without me pressuring her. Or you're scared that if you fight for her, she might still choose the company, and you'd rather walk away now than face that rejection. The words hit too close to home. Mason stared into his coffee cup. I can't compete with billions of dollars, Ma. I can't compete with a company she built from scratch. I can't compete with her entire life. You're not supposed to compete. You're supposed to be her partner, someone she can turn to when the whole world is pressuring her to be something she's not. His mother squeezed his shoulder. Emma would kick your ass for giving up this easily. Emma would understand that sometimes love isn't enough. Bullshit. Emma would tell you that love is the only thing that matters. Everything else is just noise. Before Mason could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He opened it and felt his blood run cold. It was a photo. Lily, walking out of her school that afternoon, taken from across the street with a zoom lens. The message below read, how does it feel to have your daughter's privacy violated? Call me for an interview and I'll make sure no one else prints photos of her. 555. Oh, 147. Mason showed his mother the screen. Her face went white. That's a threat. Yeah. You need to call the police. And tell them what? That a reporter took a picture in a public place? They can't do anything. Mason's hands shook with anger. This is what Scarlett was talking about. This is what her world looks like. And I brought Lily into it. You didn't do this. The vultures who think other people's lives are entertainment did this. Mason called Scarlett. She answered immediately. I just got a threatening text about Lily, he said, without preamble. Photo of her leaving school. Reporter saying he'll make sure others don't publish her photos if I give him an interview. What? Scarlett's voice went sharp. Forward it to me. Right now. What are you going to do? I'm going to call my lawyer and make sure that reporter never works again. And then I'm going to release a statement making it very clear that my personal life is off limits and anyone who publishes photos of a child will face legal action. Scarlett, that'll just make it bigger news. I don't care. Nobody threatens your daughter. Nobody. He heard papers rustling. I'm also hiring private security for you and Lily, starting tomorrow. You don't have to... Yes, I do. This is my fault and I'm going to fix it. It's not your fault. Then whose fault is it? Her voice cracked. I dragged you into this. I was selfish, and I didn't think about the consequences, and now Lily's being targeted by jackals with cameras. Stop. Just stop. Mason took a breath. We're both responsible. We both chose this knowing it could get complicated, and we'll both figure out how to deal with it. I can't ask you to... You're not asking, I'm telling you. We're in this together. He paused. That is, if you still want to be. Scarlett was quiet for a long moment. My board meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m. I know. They're going to give me an ultimatum, the relationship or my position as CEO. And what are you going to tell them? I don't know yet. She sounded exhausted. Every rational part of my brain says I should end this, that it's too complicated, too messy, too dangerous for everyone involved, that I'm being selfish, putting what I want ahead of what's practical. That's your brain talking. What's your heart say? My heart says screw them all. My heart says you're the best thing that's happened to me in years, and I'm not giving that up because some investors think I should date someone more appropriate. She laughed without humor. My heart is an idiot. Or maybe your heart knows something your brain doesn't. Like what? Like life's too short to let other people make your decisions. Like you can't build a life on what's practical. Like sometimes you have to risk everything for the things that matter. Is that what you're doing? Risking everything? Mason looked at Lily through the doorway, watching cartoons and safe for now. Thought about the garage and his bills and his reputation. All the things that could fall apart if this went wrong. Yeah, he said. That's exactly what I'm doing. Scarlett was quiet again. Then, can I see you tonight after Lily goes to sleep? The reporters. I'll have my security team clear them out. Please, I need to see you. Okay, yeah, I'll be there. Mason spent the evening being aggressively normal with Lily. They made dinner together, spaghetti with meat sauce, her favorite. They played board games. He read her 3 chapters of the book they were working through, and when she finally fell asleep, he kissed her forehead and promised himself he'd do whatever it took to keep her safe. His mother agreed to stay with Lily while he went next door. The reporters had been cleared away by Scarlett's security team, 2 serious-looking men in dark suits who nodded at Mason as he approached. You're expected, one of them said. Go ahead. Scarlett met him at the door. She looked wrecked, eyes red, hair pulled back, wearing the same clothes from that morning. Hi, she said. Hi. They stood there for a moment, 2 people who'd been apart for less than 12 hours but felt like weeks. Then Scarlett stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid. I'm scared, she whispered into his chest. Me too. What if I make the wrong choice? Then we deal with it, together. She pulled back to look at him. You'd really stay? Even if this gets worse before it gets better? I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. I don't want you to go. Then I'm staying. Scarlett kissed him, desperate and fierce, like she was trying to convince herself this was real. Mason kissed her back, pouring every ounce of certainty he had into it. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I've been thinking about what you said, about not letting other people make my decisions. Yeah? I built this company because I believed in doing things differently, in not following the rules everyone else followed. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. She took his hands. Tomorrow, when I walk into that board meeting, they're going to try to make me choose between you and everything I've built, and I'm going to tell them no. Scarlett, let me finish. I'm going to tell them that my personal life is not up for discussion, that I'll continue to run the company the same way I always have, with integrity and vision and results. And if that's not good enough for them, if they want a CEO who performs her entire life for public consumption, then they can accept my resignation. Mason's heart stopped. You'd really walk away? I'd really walk away. From the board, from the company, from all of it. Her eyes were clear now, determined. Because you're right. Life's too short to build it on someone else's terms. And I'd rather start over with you than keep everything else without you. You don't have to. Ooh. I know I don't have to. I want to. For the first time in my life, I want something more than success. I want this. Us. She squeezed his hands. I love you, Mason Reed, and I'm done pretending that's something I should be ashamed of. Mason pulled her close, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was offering. I love you too, so much. They held each other in her entryway, the world outside forgotten. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, they had this, each other. A choice made not from fear, but from certainty. Stay, Scarlett said. Not just tonight. Stay. Move in here with me and Lily. Let's stop pretending this is temporary. That's fast. I know. But I'm tired of slow. I'm tired of careful. I want to build a life with you, and I don't want to wait for the perfect time because there's never going to be a perfect time. Mason thought about his little house with the sagging porch, about the life he'd built there with Emma, the memories soaked into every wall, about letting go and moving forward. Okay, he said. Yeah, okay. Scarlett smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time that day. Yeah? Yeah, but Lily gets to pick her own room. Deal. They spent the night making plans. Not practical plans about logistics or timing, but the kind of plans that mattered. Where they'd put Lily's dinosaur collection, whether they'd get a dog, what they'd do on Sunday mornings. Building a future one small detail at a time. At midnight, Mason's phone buzzed. "Tommy, sorry to text so late, but you need to see this." A link to another article. But this one was different. It was from a major business publication, and the headline read, "In Defense of Scarlett Whitmore, Why Her Dating Life is Nobody's Business." The article was a takedown of the earlier coverage. It called out the sexism in expecting female CEOs to live their entire lives for optics. It pointed out that male executives dated whoever they wanted without media scrutiny. It questioned why Scarlett's competence was being judged based on her boyfriend's tax bracket. It's not all bad, the article concluded. Maybe Whitmore's relationship is exactly what it appears to be. A private person finding connection with someone who sees her as human rather than headline. And maybe we should let her have that. Mason showed it to Scarlett. She read it twice, then looked up with tears in her eyes. "It's a start," she said. "Yeah, it is." They didn't know it yet, but that article would be the first of many. The tide was starting to turn, slowly but surely. But the fight wasn't over. Tomorrow's board meeting would test everything they'd decided tonight. For now, though, they had each other. And they had hope. And sometimes that was enough to carry you through until morning. The board meeting started at 9 a.m. sharp in a glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of a downtown Chicago high-rise. Scarlett sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed, in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, facing 12 men and women who controlled the fate of her company. Richard Chen, the lead investor and the man who'd called her relationship a breakdown, cleared his throat. "Let's address the elephant in the room," he said. "The media situation." "My personal life is not a media situation," Scarlett replied evenly. "It's my personal life." It became our concern when it started affecting stock prices. Richard pulled up a chart on the screen behind him. "We've dropped 3% since those photos went public. Our clients are nervous. 2 have already called asking if there's instability at the leadership level. There's no instability. The company is performing better than projected across all metrics. We landed the Henderson contract last week. Our Q2 numbers are 20% above forecast. My dating life has zero impact on our ability to deliver results." "It's about perception," another board member chimed in. Margaret Walsh, a venture capitalist who'd made her fortune in the 90s. "Like it or not, you're the face of this company. When you're in the news for personal drama instead of business achievement—" "Personal drama," Scarlett interrupted, her voice sharp. "Is that what we're calling a relationship? Because I seem to remember 3 of you bringing your spouses to our last corporate retreat. Was that personal drama?" "That's different," Richard said. "How?" "Because our spouses are—" He stopped himself, but the damage was done. "Appropriate?" Scarlett finished for him. "Is that the word you're looking for? Because Mason Reed is a mechanic and not a venture capitalist, he's inappropriate?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Scarlett stood up, pacing to the windows. 42 stories below, the city sprawled in every direction. She'd conquered this city, built an empire here, and now these people were telling her she had to sacrifice her personal happiness to keep it. "Let me be very clear," she said, turning back to face them. "I'm in a relationship with someone I care about deeply, someone who makes me happy, someone who treats me like a human being instead of a transaction, and I'm not ending that relationship to make you comfortable." The room went silent. Margaret exchanged glances with Richard. "Scarlett," Margaret said carefully, "no one is asking you to end your relationship. We're asking you to be more discreet, keep it private, at least until the media cycle moves on to something else." "You mean hide him, pretend he doesn't exist?" "We mean protect the company's interests." "And what about my interests? What about the fact that I've given 8 years of my life to this company? That I've worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed relationships, moved across the country to escape the pressure you all put on me to be perfect?" Scarlett's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. "When does what I want matter?" "It matters," Richard said. "But you're the CEO. You signed up for a different level of responsibility. I signed up to run a company, not to perform my entire life for public consumption. Those 2 things are inseparable at your level." "Then maybe I'm at the wrong level." The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Richard's eyes went wide. "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" Scarlett sat back down, folding her hands on the table. I built this company because I wanted to create something meaningful. Somewhere along the way, it became about stock prices and quarterly earnings, and making sure I never do anything that might upset investors. That's not why I started this. Scarlett, don't be rash. Well, I'm not being rash. I'm being honest for the first time in 2 years. Ever since we went public, I've been miserable. I moved to Chicago to escape that misery, and for a few months I actually remembered what it felt like to be happy, to have a life outside this company. And now you're asking me to give that up again. Margaret leaned forward. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that if this board cannot separate my professional performance from my personal life, then perhaps I'm not the right CEO for this phase of the company's growth. You're threatening to resign. Richard's face had gone red. I'm stating a fact. I will not end my relationship. I will not hide it. I will not apologize for it. If that's a problem, then we need to discuss transition plans. The room erupted. Half the board members started talking at once, voices overlapping in a cacophony of concern and outrage and disbelief. Through it all, Scarlett sat quietly, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Finally, Margaret held up a hand for silence. Let's take a 15-minute break. Everyone calm down. Scarlett, can I speak with you privately? They moved to a smaller office down the hall. Margaret closed the door and turned to face her. Are you out of your mind? Possibly. You can't just resign. You're the company. Without you, stock prices will tank for real. Then the board should probably reconsider their position on my personal life. Margaret studied her for a long moment. You really love him, this mechanic. His name is Mason, and yes, I do. Enough to walk away from everything? Scarlett thought about the question. Thought about 8 years of building and fighting and sacrificing. About the 2,000 employees whose livelihoods depended on decisions made in rooms like this. About the company that bore her name and carried her vision. Then she thought about Mason's hands fixing her kitchen drawer. About Lily's laugh when Scarlett made silly voices during story time. About Sunday mornings making pancakes and the feeling of coming home to people who loved her for who she was, not what she could do for them. Yeah, she said. Enough to walk away. Margaret sighed. You know what the irony is? I actually respect that. I spent 30 years in this business and I never once put my personal happiness first. My marriage fell apart. My kids barely speak to me. All I have is money and regrets. She moved to the window. You're braver than I was. Or stupider. Maybe both. Margaret turned back. But I'll tell you what. I'll back you. Not because I think you're making a smart business decision, but because I think you're making a smart life decision. And maybe if enough of us had done that 30 years ago, this industry wouldn't be full of miserable rich people. You'll back me? I'll back you, and I'll convince at least 3 others to do the same. That's a majority. Richard can scream all he wants, but we'll outvote him. She smiled. On one condition. What? Invite me to the wedding. I want to meet this man who convinced Scarlett Whitmore to risk everything. They returned to the conference room. Margaret made her position clear, and one by one, other board members fell in line. Not because they agreed with Scarlett's choice, but because losing their CEO would be more damaging than enduring a few weeks of bad publicity. Richard held out the longest, arguing about precedent and responsibility and duty. But eventually, he too capitulated. Fine, he said, tight-lipped. Date whoever you want. But if this costs us clients, it won't, Scarlett said, because I'm going to keep doing exactly what I've always done, delivering results. The only difference is I'll be doing it with a personal life that makes me happy instead of one that makes you comfortable. The meeting adjourned at noon. Scarlett walked out of that building feeling lighter than she had in years. She called Mason from the car. How'd it go? He asked. I still have a job. That's good news. They weren't happy about it, but they backed down. She smiled. Turns out threatening to quit is an effective negotiation tactic. You didn't. I did. And I meant it. Mason was quiet for a moment. You'd really have walked away? In a heartbeat. I told you, I'm done letting other people make my decisions. I love you. I love you too. Where are you? At the garage, trying to convince a customer that yes, she really does need new brake pads, and no, I'm not trying to scam her. How's that going? About as well as your board meeting probably went. Scarlett laughed. I'm coming over. I need to see you. She found him 20 minutes later, arguing with a woman in her 60s who insisted her brakes were fine, despite clear evidence to the contrary. Scarlett hung back, watching Mason explain with infinite patience why driving on worn brake pads was dangerous. I still think you're trying to upsell me, the woman said. Mrs. Patterson, I wouldn't lie to you. Have I ever steered you wrong? Well, no. Then trust me. You need new brake pads. The woman finally agreed, and Mason walked her to the waiting area where Tommy was organizing paperwork. When he turned around and saw Scarlett, his whole face lit up. Hey, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. You survived. I survived. She walked into his arms, not caring that he was covered in grease, and she was wearing a $2,000 suit. We survived. Yeah, we did. Tommy appeared from the office. Oh, good. You're here. I have questions about the security guys you sent. They're very intimidating, and they're making the customers nervous. I'll have them be less intimidating, Scarlett said. Can you do that? Tell security people to be less scary? I can try. Over the next few weeks, the media frenzy slowly died down. New scandals emerged, more interesting targets appeared, and Scarlett and Mason's relationship became old news. The security team was scaled back to occasional check-ins. The reporters stopped camping outside their houses. But the impact of those weeks lingered in unexpected ways. Mason got calls from 2 reporters who wanted to do positive stories about small business owners who gave back to their communities. One article highlighted his practice of charging reduced rates for customers who couldn't afford full price. The exposure brought in new clients, people who'd seen the articles and wanted to support a business that valued people over profit. Within 2 months, Reed Auto Repair went from struggling to sustainable. Not rich, not flush with cash, but stable, enough that Mason could hire another mechanic and actually pay himself a salary that covered more than just bare necessities. This is weird, he told Tommy one afternoon in July, having money in the bank account. Better get used to it, boss. We're booked solid for the next 3 weeks. Because of the articles. Because you're good at what you do and people finally know about it. Tommy grinned. Also because your girlfriend is a billionaire and that's cool. She's not my girlfriend anymore. Tommy's face fell. Wait, what? Did you break up? No, she's my fiancée now. Mason had proposed on a Tuesday night in June. Nothing fancy, nothing planned. They'd been sitting on Scarlett's back deck watching Lily chase fireflies, and the words had just come out. Marry me, he'd said. Scarlett had looked at him like he'd lost his mind. What? Marry me. I know it's fast and probably crazy, and we haven't even lived together yet. We've been living together for a month. Then we definitely haven't lived together long enough for this to be a rational decision. But I don't care. I love you. Lily loves you. I want to build a life with you, so marry me. Scarlett had laughed and cried at the same time. You don't even have a ring. I'll get one. I'll get whatever ring you want. Just say yes. Yes, of course yes. They'd told Lily the next morning. She'd screamed and jumped on the bed and demanded to be a flower girl. Mason's mother had cried. Scarlett's mother had been silent on the phone for a full minute before finally saying, If this is what you want, I suppose I'll have to accept it. It wasn't quite a blessing, but it was close enough. The wedding was planned for October. Small, intimate, just family and close friends. They debated doing something big and public to get ahead of the media attention, but ultimately decided that their wedding was for them, not for public consumption. Let them write what they want, Scarlett said. We'll know the truth. In August, something unexpected happened. Mason was working late at the garage when a black Mercedes pulled up. A man in an expensive suit climbed out, looking completely out of place among the oil stains and spare parts. Can I help you? Mason asked. Are you Mason Reed? Yeah. I'm Jonathan Price. I run Price Automotive Group. We own luxury dealerships throughout the Midwest. Mason wiped his hands on a rag. Okay. I've been following your story, the articles about your shop, your approach to business. It's impressive. Thanks, I guess. I want to make you an offer. Jonathan pulled out a business card. We're expanding into luxury automotive service and repair. High-end cars, specialized work, but with your philosophy of fair pricing and community focus. I'd like you to consult on the project, maybe even partner with us. Mason stared at the card. You want me to consult? On what? On building something different. The automotive service industry has a reputation problem. Customers don't trust mechanics. They think they're being scammed. You've built a business on trust. I want to learn how. I don't know anything about running a luxury operation. You know how to treat people right. That's what matters. Jonathan gestured around the garage. This place is successful because people trust you. Imagine what you could do with more resources. Mason thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. I'll need to discuss it with my fiancée. The billionaire tech CEO? The woman I'm going to marry, yeah. Jonathan smiled. Smart man. Here's my card. Think about it. That night, Mason told Scarlett about the offer. She listened carefully, asking questions about terms and equity and long-term vision. What do you want to do? She asked finally. I don't know. Part of me thinks it's crazy. I'm barely keeping this place afloat most days. You're doing better than afloat. You're doing well. Because of the publicity from dating you. Because people saw what you were already doing and decided to support it. Scarlett took his hand. Don't diminish your success because of how you got there. You earned this. But consulting, partnering with some corporate automotive group, that's not me. Maybe it is. Maybe you're more than just a small garage owner. Maybe you could actually change the industry like this guy thinks. Or maybe I'd sell out and lose everything that makes this place special. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. Do you remember what you told me when my board was pressuring me? That I built my company by doing things differently, by not following everyone else's rules. Yeah. Same applies here. You don't have to do this their way. You could do it your way. Set the terms. Make sure they understand that you won't compromise on the things that matter. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, but you're good at hard things. She smiled. Besides, you'd have me to help navigate the business side. I can't keep relying on you to fix my problems. It's not fixing. It's partnership. That's what we do. We help each other. She squeezed his hand. I couldn't have stood up to my board without knowing you had my back. Let me have yours too. Mason met with Jonathan Price 3 more times over the next month. Each time, Scarlett came with him, asking the questions he didn't know to ask, negotiating terms he didn't understand. They structured a partnership that gave Mason significant equity and creative control while providing the resources to expand. By September, the deal was signed. Reed Auto Repair would become the flagship location of a new luxury automotive service network. Mason would oversee operations and training, teaching other mechanics his approach to customer service and fair pricing. I can't believe this is happening, he told Tommy the day the contracts were finalized. I can. You're good at this, boss. You deserve it. I'm terrified I'm going to screw it up. Then you'll screw it up and figure out how to fix it. That's what you do. The wedding arrived faster than either of them expected. October in Chicago brought crisp air and golden leaves, the kind of fall day that feels like nature showing off. They'd chosen a small venue on the lakefront, nothing extravagant, just a historic building with big windows and exposed brick. Mason stood at the altar in a suit that actually fit, watching Lily walk down the aisle throwing flower petals with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been practicing for months. His mother sat in the front row, crying already. Tommy stood next to him as best man, grinning like an idiot. Then Scarlett appeared at the back of the room, and everything else disappeared. She wore a simple dress, ivory with lace sleeves, her hair down in loose waves. No designer labels, no ostentatious jewelry, just Scarlett looking more beautiful than Mason had ever seen her. She walked down the aisle alone, having decided she didn't need anyone to give her away. She'd given herself. That's how this worked. When she reached him, Mason took her hands. Hi, he whispered. Hi yourself. The ceremony was short. They'd written their own vows, both of them crying through the words. Mason promised to fix her kitchen drawers and never stop being amazed by her. Scarlett promised to make terrible pancakes and love his daughter like her own. I do, Mason said when asked. I do, Scarlett echoed, and just like that, they were married. The reception was exactly what they'd wanted. Good food, better wine, their favorite people. Mason danced with his mother, with Lily, with Scarlett. Speeches were given, toasts were made, and through it all, Mason kept finding Scarlett's eyes across the room and thinking the same thing. This is real. Late in the evening, they snuck away from the party for a moment alone. They stood on a terrace overlooking the lake, the city lights reflecting on dark water. You okay? Mason asked. More than okay. You? Yeah, this is... He shook his head. I didn't think I'd get this again, after Emma. I thought that was it for me. You thought wrong. Apparently. He pulled her closer. Thank you. For what? For taking a chance on me, for fighting for this, for being stubborn and brave and willing to risk everything. Right back at you? Scarlett rested her head on his shoulder. You know what's funny? 6 months ago, I was miserable, living alone in that huge house, convinced that money and success were the only things that mattered because they were the only things I could control. And then you showed up in a blizzard returning my purse, and everything changed. Best purse I ever found. She laughed. Remind me to lose my stuff more often. They stood there watching the water, two people who'd found each other in the middle of their own storms. Not because everything was perfect, but because they'd chosen to weather the imperfect parts together. Inside, the party continued without them. Lily was dancing with Tommy, stepping on his feet with gleeful abandon. Mason's mother was deep in conversation with Margaret Walsh, the board member who'd backed Scarlett, probably swapping stories about raising stubborn children. Life went on, messy and complicated and beautiful. Mason and Scarlett moved into her house permanently, though they spent months making it feel less like a museum and more like a home. Lily's dinosaur collection took over the living room. Mason's tools found a place in the garage. They adopted a dog, a mutt from the shelter that Lily named Pancake. The business partnership with Price Automotive exceeded everyone's expectations. Mason trained mechanics across 5 states on his customer service philosophy. The network expanded, grew profitable, became something bigger than he'd imagined. But he kept the original Reed Auto Repair exactly as it was, a reminder of where he'd started. Scarlett stepped back from day-to-day operations at Whitmore Tech, taking on a chairman role that let her focus on strategy instead of constant firefighting. She started a foundation supporting women in tech, using her platform to change the industry that had tried to change her. They found their rhythm. Mornings making breakfast together while Lily did homework at the kitchen table. Evenings walking Pancake around the neighborhood. Weekends building blanket forts and watching movies and being exactly the kind of boring happy that both of them had stopped believing was possible. The media still paid attention sometimes. Articles would appear analyzing their relationship, their choices, their lives. But they learned to ignore the noise. Learned that other people's opinions mattered less than their own truth. One night in December, almost a year after that first snowstorm, Mason and Scarlett sat on their back deck wrapped in blankets, watching snow fall in the backyard. Lily was asleep inside, Pancake curled at her feet. You know what I was thinking about today? Scarlett said. What? That purse, the one I dropped in the snow. What about it? I didn't actually drop it by accident. Mason turned to look at her. What? I saw you pull into your driveway. I'd seen you around the neighborhood before, always looked exhausted and sad. And I thought, she paused, I thought maybe if I left something outside, you'd be the kind of person who'd return it. That maybe I'd get a chance to talk to someone real. You're telling me you staged the whole thing? Not staged, orchestrated. There's a difference. Mason laughed, actually laughed. You manipulated me into meeting you. I created an opportunity. You chose to take it. I can't believe you. Are you mad? He pulled her closer. Are you kidding? That's the best con anyone's ever pulled on me. It worked out. Yeah, it did. They sat in the snow, watching the world turn white around them. In the distance, the city glowed against the dark sky. Inside, their daughter slept safe and warm. Above them, stars peeked through the clouds. Mason thought about the year that had passed. The fear and the fighting and the choice to keep choosing each other when it would have been easier to walk away. About the truth that nobody told you when you were young, that love wasn't about finding someone perfect, it was about finding someone worth being imperfect with. Good thing you dropped that purse, he said finally. Scarlett smiled, the same words she'd whispered on their wedding day. Best thing I ever did. And in that moment, with snow falling and the woman he loved in his arms, and a future full of possibilities stretching ahead, Mason Reed understood something fundamental about second chances. They didn't come because you deserved them or because you'd suffered enough. They came because you were brave enough to reach for them when they appeared. Because you were willing to risk everything you'd carefully protected to grab hold of something real. Emma had taught him that love was worth fighting for. Scarlet had taught him that life was worth living again. And Lily, sleeping peacefully inside, reminded him every day that the best things in life were the ones you built together. The snow fell heavier, covering the yard in white, erasing footprints and mistakes and everything that had come before. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The business would demand attention. Life would keep being complicated and messy and hard. But tonight, they had this: each other. A home, a family. The simple, extraordinary magic of two people who decided that together was better than apart. And really, what more could anyone ask for?